Here at West Bank, we're really excited to sponsor Real Success, a new CBJ series featuring Iowa City's own Nate Kaeding. 2018 marks West Bank's 125th year of helping business owners and entrepreneurs find their own versions of success, whether that be opening a new store, planning for retirement, or anything in between. Please enjoy this edition of Real Success, hosted by Nate Kaeding, and thanks for watching.
Welcome to the Corridor Business Journal's Real Success series. We're very lucky to have Xavier Romano, the executive director of the Sigma Lambda Beta fraternity, here in the national headquarters here in beautiful North Liberty, Iowa, right off Highway 965, which is an interesting part of the story, right? How this Latino-based fraternity is headquartered here in the Iowa City area, and its roots in the University of Iowa and all that. But we're going to get to that in the second half of the interview. I'm maybe even more curious about you, Xavier, and your background and what brought you here today. Could you just kind of give me just a little bit of your origin story and where how you wove your way here to North Liberty?
You know, I'm from San Diego, California.
Yeah, know that place.
And went to school at the University of Oregon for my undergraduate. And like so many people with a bachelor's degree in psychology, what do you do with that? As it so happened, I was at a Cal Oregon football game. Came across a mentor and friend of mine, and I see his laugh. What are you doing? I said, well, I'm living in the Bay Area having fun, but I'm trying to figure stuff out. And he's like, have you ever worked in higher education or thought about working in higher ed? Mm-hmm. And I said, no, I hated you guys. And was a student leader at the U of O. Sure. And he introduced me to somebody who would end up being my mentor, Roberto Jaro, who was then at UC Berkeley. Okay. And took his counsel and advice. I realized that some of the stuff I was doing at the university was transferable. Sure. And 30 years later, had a great career in higher ed with 20 of those years as a VP for Student Services and Dean in public and private higher education, which has literally taken me around the world. Did a Fulbright in Germany. Wow. And looked at German student services and was able to also do some work with that in England as well with the British Council, looking at residential colleges that are faith-based. And, all those years later, my daughter and her then fiance came to us in Oregon, where my wife and I were living, and said, you guys need to move back to the Midwest because I'm getting married and you need to be a part of our lives. Okay. So we agreed that she's our only one, okay, and she's working here in the corridor, actually at Coe College. Okay. With Dave McAnally and company, and gave us all 3 minutes to decide. We said, we'll do it. Mm-hmm. But we agreed to be one flight away. Okay. Had to be 30 to 45 minutes. Colleague told me about this unique opportunity at Sigma Lambda Beta to be the executive director, and I did a little bit of homework. I'm not a Sigma Lambda Beta member. I was a member of another fraternity. In fact, SLB didn't exist when I went to college. Now, I'm dating myself terribly. I had hair. That's right, Nate. Embrace the future, baby. This is it. And really just hit it off. I mean, I met an amazing group of men who have a very passionate mission. And invited me to be a part of this ride and this story, and have been here for over a year now. And it's been an absolute joy. Very different than what I thought it would be, thinking that, 3 decades in higher education would prepare me for this. Oh, no. Oh, no. But, I walk away from it going, yeah, I mean, our students are amazing. I just returned from a regional meeting at Florida State and had a chance to meet the men from around the Southeast. Last month I was out in the Pacific Northwest in Washington. Okay. Again, I mean, the men are extraordinary. They rejuvenate me in terms of what we're doing here. And part of what we're trying to do here is provide options for wonderful young men who are in college at over 120 colleges and universities, which when you think about, for an organization that's only 32 years of age, it's spectacular. Yeah. We are different, though. I mean, as you noted, we're a Latino-based, multicultural fraternity. that is growing and growing significantly, and we have to be rather thoughtful in terms of our expansion and our ability to support that expansion. But we are also non-residential, and that was intended from day one. And that allows us to have a lesser degree of risk management than some of the horrors.
Meaning that there's not a house.
There's not a house. The brotherhood is not based on bricks and mortar. Okay. So, for example, for me, when I went through recruitment, it was about where are the rooms that are better than a residence hall? Mm-hmm. Who's got better food? Sure. And yeah, the brothers came along, but it was a very different experience where these gentlemen, it's about the relationship. It's about the face-to-face. There's nowhere to hide. Yeah. You don't get a house to hang out in. And so it's a very different kind of experience for these young men.
You hit on it a little bit, but that, one of the benefits of a fraternity obviously is that connectivity and the connection both to each other and your culture and the university and a variety of different things. Talk a bit about how you guys cultivate that not corporate-wide, but just over from the fraternity nationwide. How do you guys sort of help connect either the fraternity members to each other or back to the fraternity itself?
It's a great question, and as you might imagine, populations and demographics shift from region to region. Our structure, which is very volunteer-based, we're broken into 9 regions around the country. Mm-hmm. And within each region is a regional director. Okay. Who is a volunteer, and that regional director then has a regional board of directors that is in sync and in touch with all of our campuses and with all of our men. That in turn then funnels up to the executive board of directors. Okay. And I report to the chairman of the board, and collectively we sit down, as we will in Detroit. We'll look at where we're being successful, where we're having challenges, where would we like to see our strategic growth happen. What do we foresee coming up in the environment?
That's good. And you hit on the risk management piece. How do you address that from a leadership perspective? There's only so much someone in your position can do. You have 120 chapters spread across the United States in an environment like universities. That has to be a big challenge. It
is a big challenge, and what we're finding is when we're able to partner with the universities and we understand our position with those universities, we tend to have a better relationship. I think that's where it's helpful for my coming from the other side. Right. And having been in that role as a VP for Student Services and having Greeks and the challenge of Greek life, we are able to look at this and we partner with the university administration. We're partnering with our alums on the ground. We're partnering with our regional directors, and we're also partnering with who their contact is here at the executive office. Our sense is, collectively and together, when we're all communicating, we're going to have good outcomes. Sure. Easier said than done, and now, again, we get back into social media. You'd be amazed at how many times we spend returning phone calls or not connecting with people because a voice conversation is not a part of their culture. Yeah. And I'm just talking college students en masse. I mean, I saw this with my daughter as well as when she was an undergraduate. Right. Just text me. Yeah, right. I'm like, I would like to actually talk to you. I'm old school. and I think the fraternity and the fraternity leadership, they joke that I'm old school, but I think there's still a value and a value proposition for those personal relationships that are, frankly, are not based in social media. Sure. And that's a piece that's getting trickier, and I think one of the challenges of our young men moving forward, how do they create these lasting relationships? How do they engage the other? Particularly as it relates to social life. The world has changed considerably since you and I were in college.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do these men navigate that environment? And I think that's where we come in. I find them not shy about asking questions, which is awesome. And at the same time, they're dealing with some of the same personal fears that we all have, I want to be successful, but I also don't want to be lonely. Do I have to sacrifice studying for a social life? Well, you can do both, but you have to have some judgment there. Don't go hog wild one way and then to the other. They're also trying to figure out this thing we call the USA. And right now, when you think about it, when it relates to any multicultural population, we're living in some challenging times. And the only thing that we know is fact is that tomorrow our population in Iowa, the corridor, and in the nation will be more diverse than it was today. Yeah. But then what does that mean? You know, what does that mean for people who are second and third generation or maybe first generation? How do they fit into the national dialogue that's going on? And that in turn, I mean, I'm so proud of them because these guys are very socially engaged on their campus, in their communities, and back home. But we live in interesting times. And I think that's just the reality of it.
Absolutely. Speak a little bit about just here in the corridor or the eastern Iowa area and the role that, I mean, there's a chapter here at the University of Iowa. It was founded at the University of Iowa in 1986, the very first chapter. Talk a bit about, you know, how the role that you can play in Latino relations here, specifically in the corridor region.
Well, you know, it's interesting when we look at the demographic shifts that are happening around Iowa, the corridor is changing vastly. I think the University of Iowa is doing a very good job in terms of access and outreach opportunities. Kirkwood is struggling a little bit with that, but at the same time, their new president is so exciting, and she's going to bring some great skill sets to Kirkwood. We're going to see their numbers begin to change and evolve, but again, over time. You don't want to do this overnight. You need to do it quickly. You don't need to do it quickly. You need to do it thoughtfully. If you look at CO, they are starting to diversify their student population to begin to reflect more of the national conversation and, frankly, the national complexion of students. And so diversity isn't this thing that's for them. It has to do with all of us. And at the same time, it's also not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, and just to, we kind of fast forwarded a little bit, but this is a uniquely Iowa City origin story. Talk a little bit about how SLB, its roots and how it got founded and I mean, literally 32 years ago, we had the good fortune of being founded at the University of Iowa. And after considerable conversation, there was a desire to be close to the Alpha chapter, to be close to where we were founded. What does that mean? Well, that's where real dollars get involved. Finding good property in Iowa City that works for us is not as easy as finding something in North Liberty or Cedar Rapids, for that matter. There's a value for us being close to where we were founded. Rituals, experiences, and history allow us to connect to the U of I in a very special and meaningful way. That we frankly could not do if we were based out of Indianapolis or LA or Miami. And we occasionally hear, oh, you know, I'd love to work for you, but you're in Iowa, for God's sakes. You know, let me tell you what. I mean, the corridor is a great place to be. You got to do your homework and whatnot, but this works. Buy an extra coat or two in the winter.
That's right. Well, there is that. Okay, there is that. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at the economic growth of the corridor, from Iowa City, North Liberty to Cedar Rapids, this actually is a pretty vibrant community when you think of it 20 minutes apart. And so for people looking for activity and whatnot, they're surprised to find a lot here. With a college town like Iowa City and Cedar Rapids, it's going through this enormous growth and revitalization around the Newbo area and other parts. That's fantastic. And you know, that creates opportunities.
Absolutely. How do you measure success for a fraternity member that comes into SLB as an undergrad and goes through as part of the fraternity, and then they graduate and they move on? How do you guys, what makes a successful experience in the fraternity?
You know, if you look solely at outcomes, of course we can look at graduation rates and then grad school rates, et cetera.
I imagine there's some more intangible.
I mean, that's clearly there. What is interesting to me is the personal stories that change from region to region. Why a man joined SLB at Eastern Washington University versus a gentleman at Florida State. Similar but different. Everybody's looking for something important to them, and what I tend to find is they're looking for relationships that matter. And I think we offer an intimacy of relationship through everything from our processes to what I believe our rituals to be. I don't know our rituals, and I stay away from that, but I have to tell you, I see it across the country. This bond, this brotherhood that is really special, very distinctive, and it reminds me that you don't have to have a brick and mortar experience to have a great fraternity experience. I will also say that these men are tight regardless of if they're in their 20s, 30s, or 40s. There's a cohesion among these men that I marvel at, I respect. And frankly, I don't necessarily have that same thing, which is interesting to me.
Real quick, this is the one we always finish with.
Yeah.
Just in one sentence, how would you define success?
Do you feel joy? At the end, it's not about the dollars. It's not about do you feel personal joy.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much for taking
A pleasure.
the time. This is great.
A pleasure.